The biggest thing that you'll need to learn in running the game is actually having a game to run. You need to have something for the session that you're about to run because without nothing, it is going to be all improv. Of course, some people like to run the game that way, but a lot of people like to have things more on hand and ready to go. So I wanted to go over the ways on which to prep for our next session. Now, something to note is some people take a few minutes to prep and some people will take hours to prep. It really comes down to the circumstances of your game, what's going on, how much improv you're ready to expect, and most important of all is just how much you want to have right there in front of you. So let's kick things off. Starting off with, the first thing that we need to do to prep for our next session is to recap what we did in the last session. Because there is a lot of things that go on in our sessions, and sometimes our minds are racing and we forget some certain things. So it's important to look back at everything you did in the previous sessions and see where we are going forward. Because you can definitely look at that session recap that you have and say, oh yeah, I definitely alluded to this. I foreshadowed that. My players are steering in this one direction. When your players are dead set on going a certain way, then you know where to prep. When you have an NPC who's already told something, you don't need to reiterate it unless you really need to. So just knowing what you've already done is already a good step in the right direction. Now, this is something very important. You should do this immediately after the session or in between the time that you have until the next session. Ask your players what they want to do, because if you ask your players what they want to do next, this is going to be a double whammy, because one, you'll know what to prep, but two, you'll get them thinking and excited, which is what we need. We need our players to be excited to show up to the next session and ready to go with whatever it is that they're thinking of. And at the same time, you need to be prepared for what they are excited about. So we ask them what they want. Where do they want to go? What are they going to do? And once you have that answer, then boom, the answer is laid out in front of you. You prep what exactly that they asked for, and it works wonders. Now, something to note is your players may decide to not do what it is that they asked, in which case you have prepped for nothing. What I would strongly suggest is if you ask your players what are they going to do next, and they tell you exactly what they're going to do, and then during the next session they don't do that, or they purposely go in the wrong direction, I would seriously just straight up say, hey, I have this prepared. You guys told me you're going to do this, so we are going to do it. You could say that it's ruining some of the player autonomy there, but at the end of the day, we can only run what we're comfortable with, and it's much better to run the game that you do know than run a game that you don't know. 3, we need to build a general foundation. We know our players are going in a certain direction. Alrighty, what are the building blocks of these encounters? Are they going into the dungeon? Okay, so what's up with this dungeon? How much information do I need to know ahead of time? How much information am I going to give to my players? What monsters are they going to interact with? How does that one trap work again? Build out these building blocks. Know what's going to work. Know exactly what you need to have on hand. Know what you're going to give out to your players, because this is an information-seeking game. Your players are seeking out information. Know which information you're going to keep to yourself. Know which ones you're going to give to your players. This is especially true for NPCs. When it comes to complex NPCs, you need to know how they interact in certain scenarios. You need to know what information they know. And most important of all, you need to know what information they are willing to give to the party. Are they going to give out the quest? Are they going to be the companion that helps them along and doesn't do anything special? Are they the secret bad guy in disguise and are totally leading the party in the wrong direction? Build out these small building blocks, and once you have everything laid out, that is when you can fully dive into what you know you're going to need later on. Now, if need be, build up your stalling tactics. Now, stalling sounds a bit negative, but one thing you could think of is know that if you have a whole bunch of things prepared and your players blaze on through it, then have some things that you know are going to take up time for your players. That could be just the classic, oh, the bears attack, or the goblins, or the orcs attack, or whatever. It could be a combat scenario that you know is going to take us some time and allow you to have more stuff prepared later on. It could be a random NPC shows up and starts talking to them, and you know your players are going to try and figure out anything and everything about this NPC. It could be throwing in that trap that is going to leave your players bamboozled for hours on end, and it could be as simple as just saying, oh, there's a locked door, how do you get through it? It could be these things. Know what is going to work and know what's not going to work, because quite frankly, you could prep for 5 hours, and that 5 hours of prep can be conquered in 5 minutes. And then you could prep for 5 minutes, and that could stall your players for 5 hours on end. When you first start off with a group, you're probably not going to know exactly how long they take on certain scenarios, but once you get to know them more and more, that is when you can start to realize how much time it takes for them to do any one thing. You can even time it. I strongly recommend that you do. See how long it takes for them to get through a traditional combat. See how long they like to interact in town. See how much time they spend interacting with these NPCs. So you get a general idea on how they operate. And once you get to know your players more and more, the more prepared you will be for running your games for a certain amount of time. And if your players surprise you, then of course you can try and slide something in. And speaking of that, number 5 here, expect the unexpected. Unless you're running a roller coaster style adventure where they just go from point A to point B to point C and they get into a very specific combat encounter and they get no autonomy at all, unless that happens, you know your players are going to do something off the walls. It's just what players do. They like to come up with weird things that we didn't think of because we are only one person, but the players, they have a hive mind. They have more ideas to throw out there. They're going to get creative. They're going to get way more creative than you. You just got to learn to live with it. You got to learn to roll with the punches. You have to expect the unexpected here. And there is only so much prep you can do because it doesn't matter how much you prep, your players are going to do something that you didn't think of. That's okay. That's fine. That's part of the charm and fun of being a DM. Throwing out encounters that you do not know how they're going to be solved. Of course, we like to have the answers on hand, but you don't need to have the answers on hand. You can simply say, hey, there is a chasm in front of you. How do you get across? Your players are going to figure out the way. You don't need to try and tip your hand to them unless they're brand new. More often than not, they're going to come up with something creative. Heck, new players, I find, are actually really awesome at that, in that they don't get bogged down by the mechanics. I find that actually more experienced players get bogged down with the mechanics. Don't worry about the mechanics either. Just roll with the punches, and just let them do whatever it is they need to do. And if they come up with a logical conclusion to overcoming some sort of challenge or interacting with this NPC or doing whatever, allow for that logical and more than likely outcome to work. Or at the end of the day, just have them roll for it. It is important that we prep for our sessions, whether that be just a small amount of time or a decent amount of time. But I will say, do not over prep, because over prepping just is going to lead to more time, I believe, wasted. And quite frankly, there's just a lot of things that you don't need to prep. What I will say though is, if you do prep for an encounter, let's say, and your players skip over this encounter, then guess what? That encounter's not gone forever. That just means you can use it at a later time. Maybe in another campaign, maybe in this very campaign, but just in a different scenario. Things don't go to waste. But what I will say is, try to keep your prep to as minimal as possible, because we want to have fun too. Because I find that the more time you invest into a game, just sitting there prepping it and prepping, and then only playing a little bit of it, I find that a lot of the charm is gone. Allow there to be that magic and mystery in the game. Allow for your players to have that autonomy, and just roll with the punches and have a fun time. So go ahead and tell me, how much time do you typically prep for a session? If you're running a 3-hour game, do you spend 1 hour prep time? 2? 3? Do you like to ask what your players are going to do next, or do you want to just have them completely come up with this on the spot the next week? And what are some of your favorite stalling tactics in your games? Go ahead and tell me those things, because I would love to hear it. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. And thank you to my amazing patrons. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.